It was the end of summer. The bugs were still buzzing when I finally summoned up the courage to ask my dad if I could stay with him and Graham for the school year instead of going back to California to be with my mom, like always. Your mother would miss you, Tricia, but I'll talk to her, Dad said. Because I had a reason for staying. A good reason. My heart sang as I walked to school with all of the kids on my Graham's block on the first day of school. My mother and father had decided that I could stay just for 1 year there with my father and Graham in Michigan. In my old school in California, the kids all knew I had just learned to read, that I used to be dumb. Everyone knew that I was always in special classes. But here, no one would know. No one would tease me. And I already had my new friend, Kay. But when I got on the front steps of the school, all the neighborhood kids ran off to their classes. And when I saw Kay and I waved to her, she didn't wave back. I just stood there not knowing where to go. So I showed 2 strange girls my class card, and then they got funny looks on their faces. You're in Miss Peterson's class, room 206, upstairs. Room 206. I found it. In the classroom, a gawky boy I'd never seen before yelled, "Hey, my name's Tom. Not spelled T-O-M, but spelled T-H-O-M. Sit here next to me." He had huge, dark-rimmed glasses that magnified his eyes. I sat down and I looked around. Everyone seemed really different in one way or another. I couldn't put my finger on it. Suddenly, everyone snapped to attention. Our teacher was standing in the doorway. Short and stout, she seemed a little scary. But her eyes were friendly. I was very sure of that. She walked up to the podium at the front of the room and slammed an enormous dictionary on top of it. Then she adjusted her glasses, and without saying hello or how are you, she started reading in this no-nonsense voice. "The definition of genius," she began. "Genius is neither learned nor acquired. It is knowing without experience. It is risking without fear of failure. It is perception without touch. It is understanding without research. It is certainty without proof. It is ability without practice. It is invention without limitations. It is imagination without boundaries. It is creativity without constraints. It is extraordinary intelligence." Then she took a deep breath and slammed the book so hard it sounded like a gunshot. "Welcome to the junkyard. I am your teacher, Mrs. Peterson." She started walking around the room, looking at each of us. "I want you all to write the definition on the blackboard, post it on your mirrors, look at it every day, memorize it. The definition describes each and every one of you." At a recess that day, I couldn't wait to ask Tom, "Why is our class called the junkyard?" "Because we are, didn't you notice? All of us are like, different, odd, like stuff in the junkyard." He turned toward the playground. "See that super tall kid over there? That's Jody Beach. He's got some disease and it makes him grow too fast. He's my bodyguard. No one picks on me when he's around." He smiled. "That kid over there, that's Gibby McDonald. He has Tourettes. And then there's Stuart Bean, and he has diabetes. Me, well, I have trouble seeing. They call me Sissy Boy because even so, I love ballet. It's my life." "I take ballet too. At least I did in California," I said. "I knew there was something about you I liked," Tom said. I had found a soulmate in Tom. And since he thought Jody was nifty, so did I. But it only helped a little. When I got home that night, I told Dad and Graham about my day. I tried to be brave and not let them know how sad I really was. But just as Dad was tucking me in at bedtime, I finally burst into tears. "Oh, Daddy, they've put me in the special class again. It's called the junkyard." "Junkyard? What junkyard?" my dad asked. "That's what everybody calls our class." "Darling," my dad said, "you are not a quitter. Stick it out for a month. If the class doesn't get better, I promise I'll send you back to California." I didn't tell them that when I tried to sit with Kay and her friends at lunch, she said that the junkyard kids couldn't sit at her table. The next day, Miss Peterson arrived in class with a basket full of small glass bottles. "Today," she said, "we are going to determine your tribes," and she gave us all a glass vial. "Tip some of the liquid on your wrist. Smell. Some of you smell like lemons, and some like cinnamon, and some like almonds. Now, can you smell someone that has the same scent as you? They will be part of your tribe for the year." I sniffed my own wrist. Vanilla. We all strolled around the classroom, sniffing each other's wrists. I sniffed a boy's wrist who was wearing a homespun shirt, and he sniffed mine. Vanilla, we both said. My name is Gilbert McDonald. Call me Gibby. And then the two of us fanned out. I found a girl who smelled like vanilla. Looks like you're in my tribe, I chirped. She just smiled, but she didn't answer me. Gibby came over with Tom. Vanilla, he announced. My bodyguard is Jody, too. So Tom, Gibby, Jody, and I were in a tribe. I asked the shy girl her name. She wrote it down on a piece of paper. Her name was Ravan Sowles. Tom told me later that she hadn't spoken as long as he had known her. From then on, whenever there was a project to be done, Mrs. Peterson had the tribes work together. Ravan never talked, but she was a whiz at math. Gibby had tics, and he shouted for no apparent reason sometimes. But his father was a professor of engineering, and Gibby loved to build things. Boy, he was smart. Jody loved reading everything, particularly poetry. He even wrote some poems of his own. And Tom made us all laugh. He was so very clever. Me, of course, I could draw. So I became the official journal keeper. The borders were all filled with my drawings. It wasn't long before Tom, Jody, Gibby, and Ravan and I were all best friends. We did almost everything together. Even after school, we visited Jody, who lived out on a farm east of town. His mother decorated cakes, and she was working on the tallest wedding cake I had ever seen. We all helped her. One night, Gibby's dad had set up a telescope in his backfield and invited the whole class over to take a look. We could see Saturn with our naked eyes, but in the telescope, we could see Saturn's rings. We never did go to Ravan's house. She lived in a foster home, and I don't think she was too happy there. But her foster mom let her paint beautiful designs on silk from an old World War II parachute, which she brought to school to show us. My dad arranged for the whole class to go to the neighbor's farm and have a hayride that took us way off into the fields. Our class was special, all right. The Junkyard kids were pretty amazing to begin with, and Miss Peterson, she showed us how to shine. She even helped us make badges that said, "The Junkyard Wonders," so you can be proud of who you are, she said. That day we got our badges, this mean boy came running up to us. Weirdos! Now you even wear dumbbell pins. A boy named Barton Poole grabbed the pin off of my shirt. I started to cry, but then Tom and Gibby ran at Barton and his friends. Right, one of his friends says. Now Twinkledoes and the jerkin' fool are gonna hurt us. Yeah, we're so scared. Just about then, Jody, big, wonderful Jody, appeared out of nowhere, and the mean boy sure backed off. Someday, you aren't going to have this freak to guard you, Barton snarled as he stalked away. That day, Miss Peterson could see that we were all badly shaken. Gibby finally spoke up. Mrs. Peterson, he said, we're all junkyard kids, even though you try to make us feel better about it. We're throwaways, junk, and everyone knows it. Oh, my dear, that is where you are so wrong, she said wistfully. Every one of you is my wonder. Don't you realize what a junkyard really is? It's a place for a thing that nobody wants, Jody answered. Oh, it's a place full of wondrous possibilities, she said. What some see as bent and broken and throwaways are actually amazing things waiting to be made into something new, something unexpected, something surprising. We all looked very puzzled. All right, class, get your coats. We are walking to the Melvin Beach junkyard right now, she exclaimed. At the junkyard, Miss Peterson stopped us. Now, form into your tribes. Then collect everything you can think of that can be made into something new. Remember, Wonders, here's your chance. Forget what the object was and imagine what it could be. Each of us tribes set across the junkyard, collecting wheels and door handles, latches. We vanillas hadn't gotten just the right junk until almost the end of the visit. As Jody, Ravan, Tom, and I were climbing over our last pile of assorted junk, Gibby called to us. He was standing under a shed roof, looking up. There, hanging from the roof strut, was an old wrecked model airplane. Gib, that's just an old torn-up plane, Tom said, turning to leave. No, Gibby said. It's a beauty. I see it. We are going to rebuild it into something bigger, better, something wonderful, something that will defy gravity itself. This plane is going to fly all the way to the moon." And there was such wonder in his eyes that we knew we had just what we needed. For the next few weeks, during the last hour of class time, we worked on our inventions. As we hammered and sawed and cut, Miss Peterson read to us Great Expectations by David Copperfield, and sometimes poetry. But every day, Miss Peterson reminded us, some people will look at things the way they are and cry, why? But I want you to look at things and see what they could be and ask, why not? Gibby was the boss of our plane project. We removed all the outer skin, built new balsa struts, and repaired a lot of the skeleton. Ray-Ban replaced the old skin with pure silk. Finally, we repainted the built plane with low-resistance lacquer. But would it fly? The day came when we were to present our projects, our stupendous projects. The Cinnamon tribe was first. They unveiled a tangled sculpture of hollow tubes. "Well," Miss Peterson asked the Cinnamons, "what is your invention?" "A vibraphonophone!" the Cinnamons called out. It took 3 people to play it. It was fabulous. The Almonds made a hanging wall maze full of levers and fulcrums and counterweights. When the ball bearings were loaded into the top, they clattered all down, bounced and shivered and jumped as they raced through the maze. It was stupendous. When the Lemons uncovered their device, none of us could figure out what it was. "This is perpetual motion." Dallas Schaefer gave his invention a shove. The whole thing leaned forward, ringing bells, pulling at springs, twisting back and forth. We must have watched that thing for like 15 minutes. Everything kept moving, and it just didn't stop. And when it was the Vanilla's turn, Gibby pulled the cover off. "But that's just an old model airplane," Booth Schaefer shouted. "Oh, wrong," Gibby shouted back. "This here airplane is going to defy gravity. This baby's going all the way to the moon." Everyone laughed. Miss Peterson spoke up. "If Gilbert says it's destined for the moon, I, for one, believe him." "Come on, Gibby, will that thing fly?" someone shouted. "Oh, we'll fly. It will fly all right. We flew it like a kite off of Putnam's Hill," Jody trumpeted. "We had." "That was off a hill. For it to fly by itself, though, we need a propulsion unit." "He means a motor," I added. "And we found the perfect one. It will take the plane right into the sky. The trouble is, it's expensive." That's when the tribe stepped in, all of them. Miss Peterson asked the whole class if they'd help raise money for the motor. Everyone cheered. It was unanimous. They would. For the next few weeks, all of the moms made cakes and cookies and sold them at bake sales. Our dads sponsored car washes. All of us junkyard kids used things we have gotten from Mr. Beach and made gadgets to sell. By that spring, we had made enough money to buy that perfect motor. The next thing to do was set a date to launch. We wanted everyone in the school to see it. And then Gibby thought of the school science fair. "Perfect," Jody said. He had started missing a lot of school and not feeling well. When he was there, Ray-Ban was at his side. Sometimes she even helped him climb up the stairs. "We could launch it from the school roof and it would fly over the field where the fair is," the class all cheered. "Maybe," Miss Peterson said. "But wait, this magnificent airship has to have a name." Everyone started calling out names like Fabulous Flyer and like Windy Wings. Jody stood up. He sure looked pale. He started to talk. "I think she needs to be called the Junkyard Wonder because we made it out of junk because we Junkyard Wonders made it. The plane is us." And then he sat down, very out of breath. It was a week later when Mrs. Peterson was late. She was never late. Her eyes were red, and she looked very sad. "Please sit down. I have some very bad news." There was silence. "We have lost Jody Beach. He passed away last night in his sleep." Then she put her face in her hands, and she cried. "How?" I managed to sputter. Ray-Ban and I held hands. Jody had a disease that made his body grow faster than it should. It just kept growing and growing so fast that his dear little heart couldn't keep up. It just gave out, Miss Peterson said. Later that day, the whole class went to the woods behind the school to collect flowers and to remember Jody. I know what the plane has to be called, a voice called out. At first, we couldn't figure out who was talking. Then, to our shock, we realized it was Ray Van. None of us even knew she could talk. He wanted it to be called the Junkyard Wonder. That's what it has to be. Tears rolled down her cheeks. All of us agreed. Gibby's dad mounted the motor on the machine and placed it on the table at the back of his workshop. When we saw it, we all gathered around. It was so beautiful. We tried it out more than once from the hill in the back of Gibby's house. It seemed to work, but would it work on the roof of the school on Fair Day? And would we even get a chance to try? The stairway to the roof was always locked. Maybe Mr. Weeks, the janitor, could help us get on the roof. I think he will, Miss Peterson said, but it will have to be our secret. The day before the fair, we could hardly contain ourselves. Would the newspapers be there? Scientists from the nearby university? We huddled together on the playground, chattering about our plans for the launch. Cheese it, look who's listening, Tom warned. It was Barton Poole, and he heard everything. He leaned into Gibby's face and he sneered. No one's allowed on the roof. Got it? And I'm telling the principal all about your stupid plans. And sure enough, when we got back to the schoolroom, the principal was waiting for us, and Barton Poole was with him. I have been informed of your plans for the science fair, Mrs. Peterson. There will be no launching from the school roof and no fuel-driven airplanes anywhere on the school grounds. It could be very dangerous. Mr. Weeks will keep your plane in the janitorial closet until the end of the school year. The principal turned on his heel and left the room. Mr. Weeks looks very sad as he carried the Wonder out of the room. Sorry, kids, he said. We were stunned. Ray Van started crying. This was going to be for Jody, she whispered. Miss Peterson said nothing for a time, and then she began. We are going to launch the Wonder tomorrow, just as planned, and from the roof. Mrs. Peterson told us to be at Mr. Weeks' closet tomorrow morning, the morning of the fair. Our secret weapon turned out to be Mr. McDonald, Gibby's dad. If Mr. McDonald stayed with us during the launch, the principal was okay with it. We couldn't believe the good news. Mr. Weeks handed the Wonder to Gibby's dad. Let's take her up, he said to us. On the roof, we could see the children pouring into the field to look at the science exhibits that were being set up. Ray Van pulled gorgeous silk streamers that she had hand-painted out of a bag and let them stay rolled up at the edge of the roof. Then, with Tom's help, Gibby and his dad put the Wonder in place. They carefully connected the engine to the car battery, and then they primed the pump to deliver the fuel from the tins sitting next to it into the engine. Then they pumped the fuel into the plane. We all stood back and watched. Maybe it'll go all the way to Lansing, I speculated. Maybe even to Detroit, Tom said. Maybe around the whole world, Ray Van whispered. No, said Gibby with a grin. This baby is going straight to the moon. When the whole school was assembled on the field, Mrs. Peterson signaled Gibby's dad to begin the countdown to start the engine. Mr. McDonald knelt in front of it while Gibby held the plane still, spinning the propeller over and over again. But the engine didn't catch. We held our breath. Pump the intake again, Mr. McDonald said to Gibby. He asked some of the boys to hold on to the Wonder. And you have to let it go just at the right moment or it'll bank left or right, understand? He spun the propeller a few more times, and then, with a loud bang and a roar, the propeller started spinning. Blue smoke puffed out. Someone in the field yelled, and everybody looked up at the roof. It was then that Ray Van unfurled her banners down the side of the building. Almost to speed, Gibby's dad hollered, 10, 9, 8. And when he got to 1, Mr. McDonald hollered, let her go! The Junkyard Wonder shot out of everybody's hands. It was airborne. First it went over the field, and then suddenly it sputtered, and it seemed to stall. Then the engine roared to life again, and the noise was deafening. The Wonder's nose pointed up, straight up, like it was going straight towards the sun. We all ran to the wall of the roof and watched breathlessly as it streaked toward the cloud cover and then appeared above, ever skyward, straight into the stratosphere. We all watched until it became a speck in the sky. until we couldn't see it anymore. Even though the science department from the local university was there, along with the school board and the newspapers, for all of us, it was only Miss Peterson that mattered. And Jody. Tears glistened in Miss Peterson's eyes as she watched the wonder climb into heaven. Like I said, Gibby whispered, that baby is going straight to the moon. Miss Peterson has always been with me all these years. So have all those in my tribe. Tom went on to become the artistic director of the American Ballet Theater Company in New York. Ray Van became a textile designer and was eventually invited to Paris to design for the fashion industry. As for Gibby, well, he went on to become an aeronautical engineer for NASA. He helped design the lunar modules for the Apollo missions. And me? I became a creator of books for children, for all of us. Miss Peterson was the wind beneath our wings. She was the alpha of our tribe. She was our compass. I saw Gibby in Houston a few years ago. We spent the afternoon recalling our time together in the junkyard and how Miss Peterson helped us believe in ourselves. And then Gibby's eyes misted over. He leaned into me and he grinned and he said, "Remember that photo my dad took of all of us that day on the roof after we launched the Wonder? Well, Patricia, I stowed that photo above the lunar module on Apollo 11. All of us Wonders really did make it to the moon, after all."